You don't expect them to be going through the problems that they're going through right now. And I think at this point in time, you almost have to look at making a change.
Whether it's snot, Vaseline, shit, boogers, Vagisil. Have you ever received a ball that's been marked up?
Obviously, with what he's done over the last couple of years and even into this year, I think it's very much still Quinn's job.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast. All right,
here we go.
Welcome to week 4 of the edition of Johnny's Intangibles. I'm Collin Wilson from the BBOC. Joining me today every week, the man, Johnny Manziel, is here to talk about the latest things happening in college football. But we're going to start off with Johnny's MVP of the week. Johnny, welcome to the show. There are a lot of candidates here. It was kind of a subpar slate for some of us that were kind of jonesing for some Northern Illinois action to beat Notre Dame, and we didn't get any of that. But we had a lot of MVP performances. Jalen Milroe still has not made a mistake in some passes. Luther Burden doubled his targets because Missouri needed him to overcome Boston College. And RJ Harvey is just a machine down there for UCF. He's got 9 all-purpose TDs. But Johnny, who is your MVP of the week for college football during week 3?
Yeah, I think this week a guy who really stood out, Jalen Milroe, did an unbelievable job with Alabama this week. I think just timely plays throughout where they really need him to go and make a play. 26-yard touchdown pass he threw is a high elite level throw that he's dropping in the bucket to the outside to the numbers. And then obviously what he can do with his legs, being able to bring, both a threat with his arm and running the football, I think just gives a huge, dynamic ability to this Alabama offense. One that, he's very much, showcasing week in and week out so far. And I think, they're going to need that from him throughout the rest of the season.
Have you ever seen a 17-year-old like Ryan Williams before? Is it fair that Alabama has that kind of weapon?
You don't usually see a lot of guys who come out of high school 17 years old like that, who come in and make immediate impact like he's doing week in and week out. And it's awesome to see. I mean, if you're an Alabama fan, you have to be thrilled that guy's there for the next, 3 years, obviously, as being a true freshman. But man, the guy is coming out ready to play week in and week out, and people can't really guard him. So to have somebody like that young with the ability to do it that early is truly impressive.
Absolutely. Speaking of 17-year-olds coming out of high school because I want to play college football, Arch Manning had his big moment this weekend for Quinn Ewers, who got hurt. Listen, there is a piece of film that I fell off the couch. Because when you think of the Manning name, you think of accurate passing, you think of Super Bowls, you think of Peyton and Eli. You don't really think of Cooper, who had the burners. And we've heard Peyton say it before that he actually has some pretty good speed. The film that I want to review with you this week was the zone read executed by Arch. And the questions that I have for you, running something like this so many times in your career, did UTSA and Contain just screw this up, or did Arch read it perfectly and absolutely turn on the Jets that none of us expected? Was this more Arch Manning, or was this more UTSA just missing the play?
I mean, I think this is a lot to do with just being a good football player, what Arch is coming in and asked to do. I mean, the defensive end absolutely just bites and just ends up just taking off after the running back. And he still, as he takes off, he's 10, 15 yards downfield. He still has a guy that he has to make miss. And still being able to do that, put a little move on and take off. It's not something that you have seen from this Texas offense a lot with a quarterback running the ball. We know we don't see it with Quinn Ewers very much, but for Arch to come in and do this early, read it to perfection, and be able to, outrace everybody to the end zone, I think as you're watching on Saturday, everybody's eyes kind of like open up a little bit, because this is not something we're used to seeing.
Not at all. Not with the name Manning on the back of the jersey. But I think the big question for Texas football, and I know Sarkisian is going to be extremely political about this, right? He's not going to name a quarterback. He's not going to give one or the other, no matter how great Arch does in the coming weeks, with a pretty soft schedule coming up. But once he gets to Red River and then Georgia the following week, that's when Quinn Ewers should be healthy. I would argue that there might not be a quarterback battle, because Quinn Ewers has negative 13 career rushing yards on designed runs. He can't run inside zone read like what we saw. And we just saw Arch Manning ripping off a 67-yard run there. Is this Arch's job? I mean, if you can simply add to the Texas depth at running back, which they don't have because of all the injuries, does this become Arch's job?
I don't think so. I think this is still very much Quinn's job. I think obviously with what he's done over the last couple of years and even into this year, I think it's very much still Quinn's job. He's just got to get healthy. And this is being a backup. This is what you're eager. This is what you're excited about, to get your time and your chance to get in and make some plays. ULM and UTSA, these are, games that Quinn has the ability to kind of, get healthy, make sure he gets himself right. And Arch will definitely love the reps that he's getting in this, but I don't see this as being a long-term thing, and one that's even going to bring any decision as far as the Texas quarterback battle goes.
Yeah, it should be interesting in the Texas quarterback room once those two games of Oklahoma and Georgia come up. Speaking of the Bulldogs, not really sure what happened this weekend with a 1-point victory against Kentucky. And when you look at what Georgia has done on the road in SEC play, last year they were tied with Auburn entering the fourth quarter in Jordan-Hare Stadium. They won just by a possession. In week 5 in 2022, they went to Missouri. They were down 22-12 in the fourth quarter, but they ultimately ended up winning that game. Johnny, you had a similar experience in Missouri Stadium in Columbia in 2013. And so the question is it just tough to win in the SEC on the road, or do we have to actually worry about the Georgia Bulldogs this year?
I think at times it is hard to win on the road in the SEC. I think this is one of those games that Georgia could have overlooked a little bit, and Kentucky came out throughout this game and got after them. I think in every facet of the game, Georgia didn't tackle very well throughout this game and let Kentucky kind of get loose at times. But, Georgia also didn't look like themselves on the offensive end, which is something that we haven't been accustomed to seeing. Carson Beck didn't look like himself very much. They made quite literally just enough plays to run out of Kentucky with this victory. And I think just at times throughout the SEC, you do get some of these teams on the road that are, ready to come after you. The number one team in the country, in my case, being a guy who had just come off a Heisman winning season, I think, when you have a little bit of a target on your back and you're up there at that level, teams are gunning for you and they're trying to take you out. And this was a very, very close call for Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, it's an amazing turnaround for Kentucky, a team that did not look good the week before. Speaking of teams making a major comeback, Texas A&M is back in the top 25, a program you kind of know very well. We mentioned that Mike Elko and Collin Klein might pivot to Marcel Reed because his skills match what Collin Klein wants to do with the offense. But because of the injury situation with Connor Weigman, Marcel Reed got that chance. 3 total touchdowns, 33 scramble yards, 50 yards on the ground from designed runs. Is the Aggie ceiling redefined offensively because of what Marcel Reed can do in Collin Klein's offense?
Yeah, I think he played unbelievable on Saturday. I think, our offense as a whole, running the ball, being able to really punish and push around Florida a little bit. And you could see Collin Klein in the booth throughout the day after he's making some of these plays was absolutely hype. And I think this does give the A&M offense a little bit of a spark. I'm not sure, exactly what's going to happen moving forward, whether they're going to go back to Weigman or it's going to be Reed. But as a whole, as a team, to go out and have a performance like they did on Saturday, I think they have to be through the roof excited. They really did run it down Florida's throat and really kind of just do whatever they wanted to for the most part.
Well, let's make an agreement right now. When my Hogs face your Aggies, let's just take the over, right? Let's just do Taylor Green, Marcel Reed over. We're not going to go against each other.
That sounds about right.
There's going to be a lot of points. Well, Johnny, the news is all positive for Texas A&M, but there's one team that's not so positive, and that's the Florida Gators. They needed some wins here early in September because the schedule is brutal later on. Ole Miss, Georgia, they have everybody under the sun playing in the last 6 weeks of the schedule. It's not looking good for Billy Napier. If you were a consultant to the program, advising the athletic director, a team that's losing recruits, losing in the state of Florida, losing games on the field, what advice would you give the Florida Gators?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Florida Gator program. I mean, you look back in the past, they're storied. You don't expect them to be going through the problems that they're going through right now. And I think at this point in time, you almost have to look at making a change and getting some excitement back in there, because right now it is very much of a struggle through these first 3 weeks of the season. And they really can't get out of their own way right now. So some excitement, something's going to have to come in and give that program a little bit of a boost, because it is only getting tougher from here on out.
So early week 4 thoughts, moving on to the card coming up this weekend. There's a really interesting scenario. Well, Josh Heupel is going to return to Norman after serving there as quarterback, nearly winning the Heisman. I mean, literally lost by just like 100 votes back in 2000, winning a national championship. Now he's, he coached there in Norman. He's had assistant jobs elsewhere, but now he's the head coach of a major top 10 program with Tennessee. First time for him to stand on the sidelines of the opposing team's sideline in Norman and go against his old team. So I have to come up with sort of a scenario. If Johnny Manziel was the head coach of a college football team, how would it feel to be on the visitor sidelines at Kyle Field to coach against the Aggies?
It would obviously feel really weird, but I think this is a game that you absolutely want to win. Being in a position of being a head coach going into your old alma mater, you want to come out of there with a victory no matter what. And I think this is what Heupel in Tennessee wants to go in and improve. I mean, they have a very good football team in Tennessee right now. To go back and have the chance to go into Norman, I'm sure it's going to be absolutely electric for them.
If you had 5-possession lead on Texas A&M and it was maybe the beginning of the fourth quarter, would you, Johnny Manziel, personally take your foot off the gas?
I mean, I think you probably have to a little bit, save your alma mater a little bit of face. I don't think you just keep stomping on their throat and keep running it down their throat. But, I guess we'll get a chance to see how Heupel takes it this weekend.
It's going to be interesting. High drama here. All right, we're going to end on something we can't. I know it's NFL, but we can't pass on this whatsoever. There's a puke ball in the NFL. Malik Willis got the chance to play some quarterback this weekend. His center happened to vomit on his left hand and on the ball before snapping to Malik in shotgun. So I have to ask you, Johnny, whether it's snot, Vaseline, shit, boogers, Vagisil, have you ever received a ball that's been marked up and you weren't able to throw it? Like, have you ever received a ball like that? And what would Johnny Manziel do? Would you attempt to throw on third down or just tuck it and go like Malik did?
I mean, you don't see this every day, but it definitely happens. You can definitely get a ball, get a snap that maybe a little wet from the pants or something like that, but definitely not a full-blown puke ball. I think, as you drop back, you can kind of feel that thing in your hand a little bit with what it is. So I think, just tucking that thing and taking off and running and just chalking it up to just a tough break. But, being a quarterback, you have to be able to deal with whatever comes your way, however that snap comes out. But this is something you don't see all the time, but the linemen in the trenches, man, they're getting after it. And sometimes you just have to let it fly.
I mean, when you play in Green Bay, you're not expecting this, right? You're not expecting puke balls. You're expecting ice balls, right? Snowballs, sleet. So, all right, that'll wrap it up for today. Thank you, Johnny, for joining me on another edition of Johnny's Intangibles. We'll be back next week, same time, same place at the BBOC channel. Thank you.